So this is one of my really early comics that I did when I was first starting out. At that time, I didn't know what professional artists used to draw comics. I went to the art store and found these technical pens, and they said drawing pens, so I thought this is what professional artists would use. So that's what I used to draw the lines. For the coloring, I colored it digitally and I used the painter program to get this painterly look. I liked how it turned out, but when I studied my lines apart from the digital painting and effects, I felt that they looked a little plain. Not that plain looking is bad, sometimes I still want simple and plain looking lines for certain kind of comics that I do. But I wondered, how could I make my line work look more interesting or exciting if I wanted to? I studied the lines of artists like Quentin Blake. Other than his signature loose way of drawing people and things, I also noticed that sometimes his lines went thinner and sometimes they went thicker in some parts. Was that also what made his lines look interesting? Looking at Charles Schultz's lines, same thing. Some parts thick and some parts thin. Looking at manga by Masamune Shirow, I realized that all these professional comic artists that I like all like to use line variation in their drawings. But I was still wondering, does it make that much of a difference? Finally, the artist that really got me excited about using line variation in my drawings was this artist, Ashley Wood. Maybe it's because he used a larger variation in his line width. His lines can go from really thin to suddenly super thick. And to me, that made his line work look really interesting and exciting. And this is how his line work looks with some simple flat coloring. This was a direction I was interested to try out for my line work for comics. I tried reproducing his kind of line work with my technical pens, but they just could not produce that kind of lines. So I went on the hunt to find a line tool that could produce the kind of line variation I see in Ashley Wood's drawings. The closest thing I could find at that time was the Zig calligraphy marker. It had archival quality waterproof ink. The nibs on each end are chisel shaped, one small and one big, and by tilting the nibs at different angles, they gave me that line variation I wanted. This is using the small nib, and this is the bigger nib. Yep, enormous line variation. And these are some quick sketches I've done with the pen. And so yes, this pen did give me lines that were more interesting and exciting. So I think it's like speaking. To demonstrate, I could talk in a voice that doesn't have much variation in volume. It sounds simple and pleasant. It's not bad, but it's not exactly very exciting either. But if I altered the volume of my voice such that there's some loud and some soft, my talking would sound more exciting or maybe dramatic, wouldn't you say? Of course, it doesn't need to be extreme all the time. It just can be sometimes a bit louder and sometimes a bit softer. And that can make all the difference in making it a bit more exciting. Like in Quentin Blake's drawings, his variation is more subtle. You'll notice that I chose to make loud certain words that I wanted to stand out more. It's not random. In the same way, that's how I use the Zig calligraphy marker or any other drawing tool that gives me line variation. Okay, let me demonstrate with this drawing here. I have done it in pencil and I'm gonna trace it using a light box. For the areas that I want to stand out more, I make the line thicker. It's like using the loud voice. It will stand out more because a thicker black line against a white or lighter background will create more contrast. And contrast creates emphasis or more attraction. You can watch my video on that as I explain it in more detail. Conversely, the parts that I don't want to stand out so much, I use a thinner line. And the thinner line has contrast but a lot less contrast. And so that area of the picture will not stand out so much. I'm also coloring in some blacks to increase the contrast around the heads because I want those areas to stand out. And then I'm done with the line work. Now I'm taking a picture and import it into Procreate, and then I'm coloring it digitally using simple flat colors. Right now, I'm paying attention to the tonal value contrast as I'm doing the coloring. This helps the important parts of the picture stand out more clearly. But I find that this part is a bit easier because the line variation has already helped out in making certain parts stand out already. so in a way I can keep the coloring somewhat simpler. And I'm done. And this is how Ashley Wood does his flat coloring. Yeah, I know, I wasn't trying to imitate him exactly, but I was trying to use the principles I think he uses. And this is another of my old comics. In this one, I used the Zig calligraphy marker as the line tool. And if I take away the coloring and effects, I think the lines alone look a lot more interesting. And here's another page from that same comic. And so that's my journey into line variation. Of course, after the Zig calligraphy marker, I went hunting some more, and I found more interesting line tools that gave me interesting line variation, like the G-nib, vintage fountain pens, Fude nibs, sable brushes, and later on I also discovered the parallel pen which Ashley Wood actually uses for his drawings, and I talked about that adventure in my video above. So I hope you found that interesting, and maybe you want to try out line variation in your artworks. Go explore and have fun, and thanks for watching.